Let's examine a story about rushing to judgment. Firing Sebastian Hale took barely 4 minutes. CEO Amelia Scott never even glanced up from her paperwork. She assumed she knew the full story. He missed a single shift without warning. No formal paperwork submitted during the required window. His supposed offense sat neatly printed across 3 lines. Her rules allowed absolutely no gray areas. She built Meridian systems entirely around that unbending corporate foundation. She believed rules were absolute laws. She demanded pure consistency, leaving zero room to pause and look deeper into her employees' actual lives. Without hesitation, she grabbed her pen and signed him away. Sebastian offered no excuses, he simply nodded and walked out. Later that night, during an exclusive dinner packed with elite business leaders, heavy doors at the back of the private room swung open. In stepped Sebastian, wearing a sharp custom suit, looking completely calm and confident. Right beside him stood billionaire Richard Hale, Amelia's own father. Stick with me here. We are about to uncover just how catastrophic her snap judgment really was. Amelia had just turned 32 that March. Working right through a harsh quarterly review, she stubbornly refused to move. She had led Meridian Systems for 3 highly demanding years. She took an utterly average, struggling logistics tech company that was barely surviving. She completely overhauled their outdated systems, turning them into the fastest-growing corporate operation in the region. Profits exploded by 68% during her first 2 years. 3 massive clients who nearly walked away signed long-term contract extensions. The executive board originally viewed her sudden promotion with quiet, polite doubt. They stopped asking any openly doubtful questions altogether. She succeeded through pure discipline and brutally flawless daily execution. She honestly believed her own punishing personal standards must always apply to absolutely everyone earning a paycheck under her corporate roof. She wasn't being malicious, she just refused to hear people out. Her team respected her, but mostly like you respect a machine that never ever breaks down. Cold, entirely predictable, and demanding nothing less than absolute competence. A handful truly admired her drive, several definitely feared her. But virtually nobody actually knew her. Her glass walls looked like pure transparency, but it was really a clever shield hiding who she truly was. She could monitor everyone else, which was all that mattered. When employees glanced back, they only saw a busy CEO endlessly working away. Constantly hustling, totally guarded, radiating a clear message to keep your distance. The single fact they knew was she grew up shadowed by the legendary Richard Hale, the powerful founder and primary owner of Hale Capital Group, the massive investment empire quietly funding Meridian and countless other tech startups just like it. Richard possessed that invisible, staggering wealth that never needed showing off. He would attend meetings twice yearly, ask 3 sharp questions, and quickly vanish again. He gave Amelia the CEO title, but certainly not out of blind fatherly love. He hired her strictly because she was the absolute best candidate on paper. Or at least, that was the cold narrative he shared. Over time, Amelia stopped searching for any hidden affection behind his business choices. They didn't openly hate each other. You and I see it clearly. 2 distant people orbiting the exact same world, never pausing to look deeper. Richard spent Amelia's youth working hard, and later he simply traveled. She left for college. Soon enough, they were just 2 grown adults standing awkwardly in the exact same room. They built this habit of maintaining a strict, formal politeness between them. Like pushing heavy furniture against a door you've completely decided never to open. She never resented him for it. She just stopped hoping for anything more. Sebastian Hale had been at Meridian Systems for 11 quiet months. He worked a mid-level systems engineering job. You and I know these roles heavy responsibility but zero visibility. He quietly sat through every single mandatory company meeting. He filed every report perfectly on time. He never chased promotions, begged for praise, or tried impressing the higher-ups beyond his own small team. His direct boss was Derek Finch, a capable but totally exhausted guy. Derek had twice flagged Sebastian's work in reviews as truly exceptional and precise. Highly efficient, often fixing major issues before anyone else even noticed them. Both times, those glowing notes were simply filed away and swallowed by the busy corporate machine. As for his co-workers, what they actually knew about his private life fit on a sticky note. He was 35 years old, with a 6-year-old little girl named Ella. He brought his lunch and vanished precisely at 5:30 without a word. People judged him for skipping happy hours, but he just smiled and politely declined. He had been raising Ella all by himself since she was just 2. He never shared the painful story of how that happened. He built his entire universe around one single truth: she was his whole world. He swore to give her every ounce of stability and safety he could possibly provide. That job at Meridian was the core of his safety net. Solid pay, steady health insurance, and a totally predictable routine. He took absolutely nothing for granted after becoming the only parent she had left. But here's a secret you and I can see. Nobody at Meridian ever asked, but his estranged father was the wealthy Richard Hale. This wasn't some dark secret he hid out of deep shame. It was simply a reality he actively chose to walk away from. Richard acknowledged his existence years ago, during a cold, brief chat that felt more like signing a strict legal contract. Sebastian just quietly listened, said his thanks, and walked right away. He never wanted a single dime. He truly didn't care about the elite access, the fancy parties, or the protective bubble of the Hale family name. He just wanted to be a man who built a real life entirely himself. Someone who could look his little girl in the eye and honestly say they earned everything they had. That was the absolute only kind of dad he ever wanted to be. So he simply worked hard, showing up early. He fixed major problems quietly. And he kept the exact same name on his tax documents that was printed on his original birth certificate. The humble name his mother gave him, leaving the wealthy Hale legacy to collect dust in some forgotten drawer forever. The morning it all fell apart, Ella had been sick since 3 a.m. Sebastian woke up to her panicked crying, finding his little girl burning up with an awful fever. Her tiny frame was rigid against the bed sheets, instantly making his own chest tighten with pure dread. Before he could fully process the nightmare he was seeing. 3 temperature checks, 104.1 degrees. We've all felt that panic. The on-call doctor said, "Bring her immediately." He rushed out in under 10 minutes, his little girl, Ella, bundled in his coat and held tight against his shoulder. That emergency room at 4 in the morning carried a very specific, haunting kind of atmosphere. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzing above, cheap plastic chairs bolted straight to the floor. You could feel how everyone there was silently terrified, just trying their hardest to hide it. Sebastian stayed seated with Ella on his lap, keeping one protective hand against her tiny back. Feeling that intense fever heat radiating, watching her pale face for any shift. She drifted into a weak, restless sleep. He stayed wide awake. The doctor ordered a saline drip and monitoring, a likely viral infection. Return immediately if the fever spikes again or if she begins to convulse. So Sebastian sat right beside her hospital bed. He spent hours cramped in a stiff chair that wasn't built for a long night. Near 5:30, he gulped down vending machine coffee that tasted like wet cardboard and metal. He forced the whole cup down because he absolutely had to stay alert. He texted his manager Derek Finch at exactly 4:47 in the morning. "Ella is hospitalized with a fever. Cannot work today, so sorry for the short notice." He bypassed the company portal because their official HR system demanded 24 hours of advance notice for any non-emergency absence. And he certainly didn't have a whole day. He only had 10 terrifying minutes and a sick kid. He made the best quick choice he could manage. He reached out to the only coworker, whose cell number he actually saved on his phone. Derek absolutely received it. But Derek never told HR. By 8:15, Sebastian was flagged as an unapproved no-show. By 9 sharp, the report reached Amelia's desk. Here is where you and I might judge her. Amelia read it coldly, trusting only the policy. Skipping work without proper paperwork filed through the correct channels was a strict disciplinary issue. She had upheld this exact rule twice before, both for lower-level corporate staff members. And both times the firing process felt incredibly awkward. But she fired them anyway, fearing that any exceptions would just look like blatant favoritism. Deciding whose private life mattered more simply was not a foundation she wanted for her business. She called Derek in. She brought Finch inside and asked him 2 simple questions. Did Sebastian submit a proper time-off request through human resources? No. Did anyone on the team get any official proof? No. She thanked Derek and sent him away. She immediately dialed HR and ordered them to draw up termination papers. She never once asked why Sebastian was missing. The question just didn't cross her mind. The rules were the rules. Sebastian finally walked into the office the next day. He hadn't slept a wink in over 30 hours. Ella's fever broke near midnight. The doctor confirmed a nasty virus, but thankfully, no permanent harm done. No long-term danger, but exactly the kind of nightmare that leaves a dad trembling in his car for 10 minutes before driving home. Still, he stayed glued to her side all night long, just watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. He needed to see her breathing with his own eyes, never rush to judge a story. You and I should watch this closely. He arrived at 8:50. At 9:10 he was summoned. 4 people waited inside: Amelia, the HR director, Derek Finch, and some woman from legal. Sebastian sat directly across from the CEO, quietly folded his hands on the table, and waited. Amelia delivered the harsh firing decision herself. She always did. To her, any leader who passed off disciplinary action was simply dodging their own responsibility. And she absolutely refused to dodge anything. She coldly outlined the corporate policy, naming his specific violation. She stated the outcome. Sebastian listened with a blank face. When she finished, he simply said, "I understand. I accept the decision." Literally nothing else. No excuses, no mention of the hospital visit. Not a word about Ella. Amelia hesitated for a microsecond, barely noticeable to anyone else, before swiftly moving on. She'd fully expected pushback, or at least excuses. Getting neither left her with a strange feeling she couldn't pin down. Had she been paying closer attention, she might have actually recognized it as deep respect. She wasn't. The formal firing played out in the open office. That wasn't Amelia's ideal choice, but it strictly followed company HR protocol. The team wasn't gathered on purpose. It just awkwardly unfolded the way these corporate firings do. People noticed, hovering halfway out of their chairs. They watched in that heavy, brutal silence that only falls when someone's life is irreversibly altered in plain sight. Sebastian quietly packed up his desk. He moved methodically, like he always did, placing every item into a cardboard box using a private, deliberate logic only he truly understood. He didn't rush, he wasn't faking dignity, he simply owned it. A few coworkers couldn't watch and looked away. Across the floor, a smug team lead named Marcus Webb watched him pack. Marcus judged the single dad for being too quiet, leaning over to mutter a cruel remark to his neighbor, mocking him for missing a single day, loudly questioning his priorities. Sebastian completely ignored the jab. Sitting right on the corner of his desk, buried under some printed schematics, lay a massive sheet of drafting paper, a complex system diagram drawn in precise ink. It was completely covered in dense notes, the kind of work taking weeks to build. To an untrained eye, it looked like the guts of a futuristic machine nobody built yet. Sebastian paused and stared at it briefly. Then he abandoned it there, grabbed his cardboard box, and headed straight for the elevator. He never once looked back. Let's look at what everyone missed. That silent diagram on his desk meant Sebastian had spent the past 4 months working off the clock. He was secretly fixing a massive structural flaw inside Meridian's routing system. A hidden glitch in their allocation architecture causing massive inefficiencies. You couldn't spot it on individual transactions, but collectively it was catastrophic. The exact type of issue that silently snowballs over time until it becomes a crisis that looks, to outside eyes, just like bad luck. He stumbled on it by accident, reading server logs on a Sunday afternoon while his daughter napped. He saw the disaster coming instantly. Right then he had begun, quietly, without asking for permission or a paycheck, to design the ultimate system fix himself. That abandoned drawing he left behind, it was their salvation. You and I know he kept it completely hidden, not yet. He planned to reveal his work only when it was entirely bulletproof. Only when he felt completely ready to attach his name to it. He took the elevator down. Stepping into the morning air, he went to collect his little girl from the neighbors. The moment little Ella spotted her dad at the door, she sprinted over with open arms, already begging for her breakfast. Sebastian knelt down, holding her tight for a long minute. "We are going to be fine," he promised her. She nodded right back. To her, that was just a basic fact. He never gave her a single reason to doubt his word. Let's look at the other side. That night, inside an exclusive dining room hidden off the city maps, Amelia Scott showed up for a dinner. An event she only attended yearly when her dad demanded she come. This crowd sat at a level of extreme wealth and power that even Amelia, managing a massive company worth hundreds of millions, still entered with slight nerves. Her father, Richard, ran with old money that totally forgot its own roots, where true power was kept dangerously quiet, and where the biggest deals always happened quietly in the shadows. She walked in right on the dot, per usual, wearing a sharp charcoal dress purchased just for these specific nights. About 20 guests filled the space: investors, board members, some faces from the financial news, and complete strangers. The lights were dim. The seating arrangement felt incredibly stiff. Finding her name card, she took a seat. A few chairs away, she spotted her dad chatting deeply with a man facing the other direction. Richard looked just like his usual self, totally calm and relaxed, wearing his age with the easy grace of a guy who never had to hurry anywhere. He caught her eye as she sat, giving a quick nod that she threw right back. Then they both went right back to their own separate chats across the big room. The fancy dinner started. Amelia was deep into a chat about infrastructure funds when the heavy door across the room swung open. A latecomer, somebody whispered nearby. She didn't glance up immediately. She calmly finished speaking, put down her wine glass, and finally turned toward those heavy approaching steps. The guy standing in the doorway was Sebastian Hale. Her brain didn't shut down, it just processed everything completely out of order. She noticed the suit first. A dark gray cut that fit him with a sharp, totally deliberate perfection. Then that posture, the exact same quiet dignity he showed leaving her office building earlier today. Next was his face, looking completely at peace in a way that felt, standing there almost solidly built. Then came the sheer confusion that hit her, the fundamental logical impossibility of the entire situation. Why was this single dad she just fired standing inside the most elite, exclusive room she ever entered? And then her father stood up, but entirely differently than how he greeted his normal peers. Usually just a quick, polite social nod. "You and I see the truth now." He stood like the person he'd waited for finally arrived. He walked across those few feet of Persian carpet between them in 4 steady, measured steps. He placed one hand gently on Sebastian's shoulder and simply said his name. Sebastian. The energy in the room completely shifted. It wasn't a sound. Instead, the collective attention of 20 individuals locked in. Everyone recalibrated toward that one single, fixed point. We've all felt this, knowing you're watching something deeply important before understanding why. Amelia stood completely frozen. She stared at her father and the single dad she'd just fired 11 hours prior, standing in a quiet, undeniable familiarity that told her right away, with absolute clarity, that she had rushed her harsh judgment. Richard resting his hand on Sebastian wasn't just some standard business greeting. It wasn't the touch of a colleague, an acquaintance, or even an old trusted ally. It was a man recognizing someone who belonged to him. The full story matters. Richard faced the room. Without any grand drama or ceremony, he simply said, "You all know Sebastian. For those who don't, he is my son." The silence that dropped next was the heavy kind, forming when a room full of polished executives encounter a massive truth that takes a bit longer to fully process. Amelia heard his words with piercing clarity. She found she had absolutely nothing to say. Let's look at what happened next. Over the following hour, the whole hidden truth slowly assembled itself. Not all at once, but through small facts landing in rapid succession. Each fact completely reshaping the man she had judged way too quickly. Richard fathered Sebastian during an old relationship that ended long before Amelia was even born. Before the marriage, and before all the corporate success attached to his famous name. He had known about the boy for years. He actually reached out. At 22, Sebastian met him exactly once, thanked him kindly, and went right back to his life, refusing every single thing Richard offered. He never begged to be acknowledged, never used his father's powerful name, never milked the family connection for a single thing. No jobs, no special contacts. Not even a quick reference to open a door that was locked tight. He took a mid-level engineering job at a company Richard owned, without telling anyone at work who he really was. He kept his head down, worked hard, and raised his little girl. He simply took one day off to comfort his terrified, sick child, and a CEO who didn't know his story fired him immediately. Sometime during the dinner, Richard quietly asked Amelia a direct question, completely free of malice. You fired him this morning, just one single absence. It wasn't actually a question at all. Amelia muttered, the company policy. I know the policy. Richard's voice held no anger. It carried something much heavier, the calm certainty of someone who knew the whole truth. I wrote that very policy. It was designed to block lazy employees, not to punish a devoted father caring for a sick little girl. She had zero answers for him. For the first time ever, she realized the cost of judging blindly. You see the lesson? Sebastian wasn't even watching her. He sat speaking softly with the man next to him, totally composed. He engaged in the dinner just like he handled everything else, completely genuine. Amelia watched him closely, realizing her intense focus went way past professional curiosity. He never bothered to explain his sudden absence from work. He had just taken the firing quietly, offering absolutely no excuses. You and I might have assumed, just like she did, that his silence meant guilt. But now she finally saw the truth, the quiet dignity of a man refusing to beg for the right to be a dad. But Richard wasn't done yet. Right before dessert arrived, he addressed the entire room. No yelling, no dramatic theatrics at all. He simply mentioned he was auditing the corporate leadership structure across his various investments. He noticed that overly strict company cultures, even if they looked highly efficient right now, were ultimately a massive liability for long-term business growth. He stated that he truly valued operational excellence. But pure efficiency stripped of real human empathy was nothing more than a machine. And machines will inevitably break down in ways that humans never would. He never said Amelia's name out loud. He didn't have to. Let's pause here, because what happened next is where the whole story flips. Richard casually revealed his son had spotted and fixed a massive technical blind spot at one of those firms, and that this effort, even though unofficial, showed the exact kind of brilliance he planned to formally reward very soon. He lifted a single piece of drafting paper high, the exact same heavily sketched diagram that Sebastian had quietly left sitting on his desk earlier that day. The entire room fell completely silent. When someone finally asked about the complex diagram, Sebastian explained it in 4 plain sentences. He outlined the bug, its root cause, and the massive financial damage it would trigger. Then the fix. He wasn't acting falsely humble, but he didn't brag either. He just laid out the hard facts the way someone describes a thing they have studied for a long time and understand inside out. Everyone at the table listened closely, instantly grasping the distinct difference between a guy who just talks a big game and someone who actually delivers. Amelia sat there listening too. When Richard slid that paper her way, she stared down at the intricate network mapped out in Sebastian's careful handwriting. She spotted it in seconds, the fatal glitch she completely missed. The massive vulnerability her whole engineering department had totally overlooked. The bug sitting quietly in her startup's code like a hidden water leak, totally invisible until the whole structure collapses entirely. She fully grasped the scale of the danger. She quickly ran the terrifying numbers in her mind. The total bankruptcy risk if that critical coding error had survived unnoticed into the coming fiscal year, and hit a staggering figure that made her throat suddenly go dry and cold, easily several $1 million. At absolute minimum, the guy who caught the glitch and solved it kept totally quiet while she rashly fired him over one unsubmitted time-off form. Sebastian flatly refused to return to Meridian Systems. He rejected Richard's offer of getting his old job back simply and calmly, holding absolutely zero resentment or anger. Not right now, he stated softly. Maybe never again. I won't work where people rush to judge your worth before knowing your story. We shouldn't rush to judge. He wasn't acting, that's just how he thought. The CEO drove home with her windows down despite the freezing air. She never even reached for the radio. She sat in silence for the 30-minute drive, letting the quiet do its necessary, painful work, which forced her to see, in the harshest light, exactly what she had turned into. She grew up watching her dad pick strict discipline over actually being there. Rules over relationships. The technically correct choice over the compassionate one. She watched that mindset mold their bond into something polite, distant, and perfectly functional. Just like a scar is functional and permanent, but completely numb. Then she entered the corporate world and repeated that exact pattern. Not because she needed to, but because it was the absolute only blueprint she knew for professional success. She mistook a cold heart for competence. She mistook rigid consistency for genuine fairness. She fired a single father sitting beside his sick child in a hospital, calling it standard workplace policy. After arriving home, the female CEO sat in her dark parking garage for a very long time. Sleep did not come easily that night. Over the next few days, she analyzed the unfair termination methodically like a blown financial report. She traced every choice backward, hunting down not just the disastrous outcome but the exact underlying assumption that caused the whole mess. The core flaw she uncovered was simply this: treating company policy as an acceptable replacement for human empathy. Believing that a strict rule enforced with total consistency would somehow guarantee perfect fairness without requiring the manager enforcing it to actually see the struggling employee sitting across the desk. Her entire leadership style was built squarely on that massive blind spot. It worked flawlessly, right until the day it forced her to fire a man in a hospital waiting room, leaving nothing but a 6-year-old's drawing behind on a cleared-out desk. She reread that strict time-off policy 3 times. Then she ordered HR to draft new rules, adding protections for unexpected medical emergencies so employees could notify management later. It wasn't a hard adjustment to make. Rolling it out properly would take about 2 weeks. You and I might wonder why nobody suggested this fix earlier. Then it hit her. Nobody brought it up because she had built an intimidating environment where making that kind of compassionate suggestion simply wasn't safe. That toxic culture was another massive problem she needed to fix. She got the fired father's home address from Richard, who handed it over without a single condition. He just scribbled it on a note and slid it across his desk, quiet and professional as always. She called him first. Showing up completely unannounced at the doorstep of a single father raising a young daughter felt deeply wrong. Sebastian picked up on the 3rd ring. Hearing the CEO's voice caused a brief pause, not angry, just carefully measuring the situation. Then he calmly mentioned he would be around on Saturday morning if she needed to drop by. She knocked at exactly 10. It was a modest apartment. You and I can judge a man's true story by what's missing here. No clutter, 0 excess, just a clean space filled with things he genuinely earned. Little Ella yanked the door open, which clearly startled Sebastian. He appeared right behind her a second later. He offered a gentle scolding that the 6-year-old completely and cheerfully ignored. You and I know Amelia hadn't been around kids lately. Standing in that doorway, the confident CEO questioned absolutely everything. His daughter Ella stared up. Kids always see the truth before adults do, judging you without pretending. She had her single father's eyes, calm, studying the whole story unapologetically. "You're the one who fired my dad," the girl stated. Sebastian winced. "Yes," the female CEO answered softly. Ella weighed the facts for a second. "Okay," she replied, and just went right back to her playtime. She was arranging tiny toy animals on the table. It had a hidden logic that Amelia, quick to judge earlier, could not even begin to grasp. Sitting at the kitchen table, they talked for nearly 2 hours, not about the company or the wrongful termination, but about life behind the scenes. They spoke plainly, no corporate buzzwords, just 2 humans uncovering the truth. Amelia admitted she judged too quickly. Not in some empty corporate way. Not the safe liability-dodging apology bosses give to avoid a lawsuit. But genuinely showing she finally saw the man's whole story. Let's face it together. She ignored the father behind the absence, hiding behind rigid company policy instead of doing the real work of empathy. Sebastian listened, never rushing to grant forgiveness. He wasn't punishing her mistake, but he wasn't letting her off either. He just listened, patiently taking in her side of the story without any act. "I had a system to submit that leave," he told her honestly. "I skipped it. That mistake was completely on me. You were in a hospital emergency room at 4 in the morning. The employee handbook doesn't have a rule for that. It needs one." She paused. "I am going to fix it." He studied her for a long moment, then he just said, "Okay." Soon his daughter wandered to the kitchen edge, gripping a little gray toy elephant in one tiny hand. She clearly decided the adults were more interesting than her toys. She climbed into the chair beside Sebastian, deeply leaning against him. It was the ease of a child who knows her dad is her real center of gravity. and Sebastian automatically shifted to make room. He never even paused the sentence he was speaking. Amelia watched them closely. She saw how easily he made space for his child. The way his arm wrapped around her shoulders with pure, practiced parental love. How Ella reached up, blindly touching his sleeve, knowing her dad was always right there for her. Suddenly, the harsh judgment Amelia had carried for years began to loosen up inside. She remembered her own father, just a cold, formal nod across a dinner table. She thought about rules enforced correctly, but completely without heart. All that emotional distance kept just to look professional. She realized what kind of boss she had become, building her career year by year. Boardroom by boardroom, she finally saw her own story with painful, perfect clarity. She had built a perfect company, but it was totally hollow. So before walking out, the CEO made him an offer. Not his old job back, something completely new. A new role as systems architect, giving the single dad full control over the infrastructure project. Letting him finish his work, proving we must always learn the full story. No throwing this single dad back into the corporate culture that broke him. Before we rush to judge, look closer. These two knew exactly what broke, deliberately choosing a much better path. The CEO didn't sugarcoat anything, and the fired father didn't answer right away. He walked the boss to the door. They shook hands. He promised to think it over, and she gave a quiet nod. She was halfway down the hall when she caught his daughter's voice, drifting from the apartment with the absolute, full, unfiltered volume of an innocent kid who just cannot grasp why anyone would whisper when they could practically shout it out. "Daddy, is she nice?" A heavy pause followed. Amelia kept walking. "She is getting there," Sebastian replied quietly. The strict CEO smiled but completely hid it from him. She kept heading down the corridor toward the elevator, gently pressing the call button, and you and I might judge her past, but standing in that quiet hallway, she truly pondered what getting there meant. Still stuck in the messy middle, working hard toward a better version of herself she could barely envision. The elevator doors opened. She stepped right inside. Meanwhile, Sebastian lingered for a moment in his open apartment doorway, gripping the doorframe while his daughter circled behind him, already deeply distracted by something entirely new. Moving through life with that pure, unshakable confidence of a kid who knows she is deeply loved. The fired dad watched those elevator doors shut, glancing down at his little girl as she beamed back up at him. Not a single complicated emotion between them. Absolutely nothing requiring apologies, long explanations, or messy adult excuses. He shut the door softly. He hadn't made his choice yet. He had time, and this single father would weigh it carefully, like he always did. But something deep had definitely shifted this past week, almost invisibly. Some rigid, unyielding block had nudged just a few degrees from its usual spot, making the whole world look completely different, and honestly, he still wasn't sure how to handle it. He headed straight back to the kitchen and switched the kettle on. Ella scrambled up onto the counter to watch the water boil, a strict rule he usually enforced. But it was Saturday, and sometimes rigid boundaries are actually worth bending once you understand them. Outside their kitchen window, the sprawling city pushed forward into morning. New chapters just begin. Most lives sit somewhere in between. Never a final judgment, just a direction. A small, quiet pivot toward a future that just might, given enough time, become what they're truly reaching for.